Welcome. I'm Lucinda Davenport, Director of MSU's great School of Journalism, and that's because of its fabulous students, faculty, alumni, friends, and guests. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about this lecture series. The annual Neal Shine Journalism Ethics Lecture honors legendary Neal Shine, who is a Detroit Free Press publisher. Shine loved the news business, and he loved being a journalist. He began his 46-year career as a boy running errands for reporters, and he went up the ranks as a reporter himself, also as a city editor, a managing editor, a columnist, and then also as the publisher in 1996. He was an integral part of the three Free Press Awards and also when it came to the Pulitzer Prize winning. He had many awards to add to his name, including being inducted into the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. Everybody knew or knew of Neal Shine. He was a role model to many, and that includes many of our faculty here on the staff in the School of Journalism. We lost a great journalist and a great person when he died in 2007. And people thought so highly of him that they all wanted to contribute and put together and establish this endowed lecture series in his name. Members of Neal Shine's family are here today, and I'd like to welcome and recognize them. So if you'll please, stand. And that is Neal's daughter, Judy Hovelman, and her husband, Jack, right here on the end. And then also when it comes to his youngest son, right, Dan. And then also another daughter, Sue Epps, and her husband, Roger. And their daughter, Claire, is on the way. So
she's a student too.
So please welcome with me. Neal Shine would be delighted to be here today. And he would like to listen to our guest speaker, who is an international photographer. Dr. Howard Boston will introduce you to our guest. And Dr. Boston, who many of you know, is an international expert and scholar in photography, and he curates photo exhibits at the MSU Museum and all over the world. We have him to thank for getting to know Natan Dvir and for bringing him to MSU as our guest. So, Howard, thank you.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Like Dr. Davenport, I'm pleased to welcome you to this year's Neal Shine Ethics Lecture. I met Neal in the early 1980s when he graciously allowed me to spend a summer working at the Detroit Free Press. I enjoyed my discussions with him then and always looked forward to seeing him when he came to MSU. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Neal's family, who've made it possible for the School of Journalism to offer this special lecture every year that focuses on some aspect of journalism and ethics. Today's lecture, Ethics, Documentary Photography, and Photojournalism, is by Israeli photographer Natan Dvir. Before I introduce Natan, I'd like to mention his exhibition 18. It explores the lives of an 18-year-old Israeli Arab youth and is on display in a new gallery space in Brody Hall, just across from the Kellogg Center, and it will be there through the end of December. Before becoming a photographer, Natan worked in the computer industry. He received an MBA from Tel Aviv University and an MFA in photography from the School of Visual Arts in New York. During the past 12 years, he has photographed for leading international news organizations, including the New York Times, the Times of London, Stern, The Economist, ABC News, and many others. He focuses on human aspects of political, social, and cultural issues. His personal projects include exploring the power of belief, African refugees in Israel, displaced people in Colombia, the Arab population of Israel, and the commercial urban landscape in New York. Natan's work has been exhibited in solo and group exhibitions in the United States, Europe, South America, and Israel. The Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, the Portland Museum of Art in Portland, Oregon, the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, Southeast Museum of Photography, Blue Sky Gallery, Schneider Gallery, Houston Center for Photography, the War Photo Museum in Dubrovnik, the Central European House of Photography in Bratislava, the Kultur Bahnhof Eller in Dusseldorf, the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, and the Museum on the Seam in Jerusalem are just some of the institutions that have shown his work. He has received numerous international awards, including Picture of the Year Award of Excellence and the International Photography Award, honorable mention for 2013, 2012, and 2011. He's represented by Polaris Images Photo Agency and the Anastasia Photo Gallery. He's also a faculty member at the International Center for Photography in New York. Please help me welcome Natan Dvir.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. First of all, thank you, Lucinda. Thank you, Howard. And thank you, the Neal family, for inviting me. I'm kind of happy to be here, especially for this lecture. It was a week long of lectures with amazing classes all across MSU. But this is kind of the gem in the crown. I've been longing to do this lecture about ethics for the last 12 years, or a little bit less than that. So finally I got the chance. During my teaching at ICP, some of these issues comes along, and usually the discussion gets heated, but we never have enough time or never have a real broad overview. So finally I had to collect everything and bring it in. I think it's an amazing thing for Neal Shine to have his name tied with ethics. So at the end of my career, that can happen again. I'll be very happy to have that. I'm going to have a kind of an unusual lecture. It's not going to be only a lecture. It's going to be a little more of a discussion at some points. We might go a little bit overboard. I'll be happy to stay around if somebody wants to discuss some of the issues you might come across. If you guys have to go, by all means, please do. I kind of try to organize about 9 or 10 issues, main issues for photojournalists or outlet medias right now in the world, and a few, like 3 or 4 extras if we're going to have a little bit of time. Some of it is going to be about my work. Most of it will not be. But let's start with me a little bit. So when I started in Israel in 2003, I started photographing issues of conflict, given the fact that we have quite a bit of it in Israel. I was working more as a job, as a freelance photographer for different magazines, mostly lifestyle magazines like Time Out, or the things that you find on the airplane when you fly from one place to another. But this wasn't the reason I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted to photograph people. I wanted to engage in their stories. I wanted to do something more meaningful. So I assigned myself to go and photograph in various situations, like in this case in East Jerusalem, clash between the police and the Palestinians, or walking around the streets of East Jerusalem with people just going back from the market. And I was very focused on human issues and about the human aspect of this very highly politicized situation. This, for example, was around an area of demonstrations concerning the building of a separation barrier between Israel and the West Bank, where when you go to farm your land at one point, you will have to face some soldiers because of ongoing conflict. But I'm showing all this because of this picture, which took place in 2006. The situation was that until that point, the Fatah was the ruler of the Gaza Strip. But at around 2006, there were elections and the Hamas won the elections. But the only way of actually taking power in Gaza is taking it by arms. So there was an ongoing fight for about a week, a war in Gaza between the Fatah and the Hamas. Fatah militants trying to escape and try to stay alive, they actually went into the no man's land in the crossing between Israel and Gaza, which is what you see here. This is the crossing called Erez Crossing. It's the beginning of that. That's the Israeli side. And about 200 meters away from there, there's the no man's land. So we are there trying to cover to see what's going to happen. And suddenly there's like a shootout. Everybody lies on the ground, tries to take cover. And here comes this person holding his bags saying, I have to go back home. I'm a Palestinian, I have to go back home. And he doesn't want to listen to anybody explaining that there's a shootout and the best thing to do is to take cover. So he grabs his stuff and he walks to the middle of that parking lot, which is obviously empty right now. And the guy in the booth asks him to stop because right now they have bigger things to take care of. So the fire goes down after a few minutes, and then I approach him and trying to understand what's wrong with this guy. And then he explains to me that what he's carrying there in the blue bag is the body of his 3-month-old baby that passed that morning at the hospital in Tel Aviv. Tried to save him, but there were complications after the birth that could not be overtaken. So all he wants to do is go back home and bury his son. And here we are, a photojournalist, having a job to do, facing with a different human situation. And ethical question comes along, how much do you actually intervene? When do you start helping? When do you not? In this case, it was pretty obvious. Myself and another couple of reporters went to the guy in the booth, explained to him that he needs to call the commander and we need to get this guy home, which happened about 15 minutes later. So this is maybe a little bit of a simpler situation. But let's talk about, what do you need to do? When do you stop being a photographer? When do you continue being a photographer? A young photographer, very successful photographer called Sarah Naomi Lokowitz. She was a student at Ohio University, a student of journalism, a graduate student. And a while ago, she met Shane and Maggie. Shane and Maggie, a couple. Shane was released from prison. She met them at a fair, and she started making contact with them. Maggie has 2 kids from a previous husband. They were together, and she started doing a story about how a person comes back into society, the difficulties of returning from jail into society. That story kind of developed in a way that she didn't necessarily expect, and she noticed that Shane was a very, very aggressive person, especially towards Maggie and sometimes towards the kids. Until one day, Shane came back home and became very violent. And here is Sarah with her camera, while Shane is threatening Maggie, asking her to go downstairs because he doesn't want to do it in front of the kids. And the toddler comes there screaming, and what do you do? What would you guys do? Call the police. So you stop photographing, drop everything, and protect her. What?
He might come after you. Then what you gonna do?
That's another option. So you just keep quiet because let him hit her, but not you. What would you do?
So I feel like there's been many times where I see a picture of like an altercation or something on the street, and then somebody took a picture of it, and there's a lot of criticism saying, "Oh, why was a photographer stopping to take a picture of this rather than actually helping?"
Well, this is exactly the case.
Exactly, and
So?
this is a case where I would feel that I might ask that question.
So I'm asking that question. What would you do?
I think my answer was I would probably put the camera down, personally.
Why?
Because it's about a lot more than getting a good photo right here.
Is it about getting a good photo here?
Yes, to the photographer.
That's the only thing that the photographer can accomplish with a camera.
I mean,
What is?
Becoming an eyewitness, maybe use this photo as evidence.
Okay, so you're talking about the responsibility of the photographer, maybe actually taking the story out. All right, maybe the right thing to do is not put the camera down, and that story might have a bigger meaning, right? Other thoughts? No? Yes? So what are we voting? Put it down? Keep photographing? What do you do?
take
Good.
one picture.
Take a picture.
Take one picture and then hit me with a camera. Well, the thing is that what you're thinking right now takes a split second when you're on the field. You have to make a decision, and the decision is now. And everything that kicks in is your personality, your upbringing, your values, and what do you think your responsibility really is? Because there is no time to think. He's going to hit her now. And there's a few values, like Sarah was attacked right and left for taking these pictures. Very strong body of work that won everything possible other than the Pulitzer. Picture of the Year award, anything you can think of, World Press Photo. And it's a question of thing. Yes, we want to be there and protect the woman. But on the other hand, as somebody just mentioned, maybe this story has a bigger life than this story itself. It can be used for a bigger thing. Other things, maybe the presence of the photographer is actually keeping that woman from being hit. Really hit. If the photographer wouldn't be there, what would the consequences be there? Maybe the presence of the photographer puts this guy in jail for the next few years, because otherwise there wouldn't be any evidence unless it's a word against word. Now there's not a word against word. It's like you are going to jail, sir. Maybe this body of work is becoming the test case for the police force across the US of how to handle domestic violence. Interesting, right? Some of you guys know this picture, right? Kevin Carter, photographer from South Africa, part of the Bang Bang Club for photographers, very known. If you guys haven't seen the film, see the film. In March 1993, he went with another group of photographers to photograph the famine in Sudan. And next to a feeding station, he photographed this picture. The picture later was published by the New York Times, and in, I think, April 1994 won the Pulitzer Prize. Obviously a bit controversial, right? They asked Kevin Carter, so what happened to the girl? He said, I don't know. Didn't you help her? I said, like, no. My job was to photograph her, not to intervene. There's also other stories that are related to that. Some say that the photographers were ordered actually not to touch the children because maybe there's going to be a transfer of disease, either way. João Silva, also part of the Bang Bang Club, was also there, and he tells a different story that they landed with a plane, and while they were distributing the food, the parents were just ditching the children, just trying to get more food. That would be the case also with that girl, and afterwards the parents would pick up the children. The vultures just came from a manure area nearby, so it wasn't something irregular, but it made a very compelling picture. So here you are with Kevin Carter. What do you do? You take the picture, right? One picture. What do you do then? Do you lift the girl? Do you bring her to the feeding station? Do you participate in this? It's a tricky situation because as photographers, especially photojournalists, we're taught not to interfere with the situation. You don't take parts. You are there to document. It's a tricky question here. What should he have done? He was criticized left and right way more than Sarah Naomi Locowitz. Until 3 months after he won the Pulitzer, he committed suicide. There were a little bit more complex story there. It's not only the criticism, he had also some personal issues. If you see the movie, you're going to understand a few of them. But it's an interesting story. If we're talking about Pulitzer Prize winners, a different picture that you might know. 1972, the US bombs a village in Vietnam. Nick Ut, one of a few photographers on the ground, photographs this picture, including this girl running naked because of all of her clothes, including some of her skin, was burned by napalm. So Nick Ut photographed this picture. Do you know what happens afterwards? This is a picture taken by David Burnett from the Contact Press, so very good agency. It's Nick Ut and another photographer washing the girl, then getting her in a car, rushing her to the medical force, and even though the medical force wanted to give up on her, they insisted that they take care of her. She's very well alive right now, giving lectures about forgiveness and accepting the other, and her and Nick Ut have a lifelong friendship that will never be torn apart. So the same question, what do you do? When do you interfere, when do you don't? It's not a very, very clear-cut line. We were not there when Kevin Carter took the picture. Maybe we would have picked her up and brought her there. Maybe we would help the guy into the booth and get him across. Maybe we would take the girl and put her in a hospital because otherwise nobody else would save her. It's a tricky situation. It's not a very clear-cut line. So if we do need to have some kind of rule of thumb, then in that split second you make a decision. What would that rule of thumb be? When do you help? When do you continue photographing? Any ideas?
Is there anyone else there that can help?
All right, that's the beginning. Is there anybody else there that can help? Let's fine-tune that idea. Let's not.
I don't know, I was like, again, like the bystander effect. Like, who else is going to help you out around the area? You don't know.
You kind of, yes.
Well, yeah, in situations so dire, I think it's a little irresponsible to rely on somebody else to help. You don't know anybody else there. You don't know if they're gonna help. So I guess I'm gonna stick with my original theory of take a picture and help. Hopefully a good
Maybe
one.
the right picture is the next one, and you just missed it because you were helping. And you
I could live with myself if that were the case, but I couldn't live with myself if I got a really good picture and the girl died.
All right. It's an interesting balance of really. I don't think that actually has to do with it, and I hope it doesn't. It obviously, everybody wants to accomplish, and you guys, whatever you're studying, you want to be fearless, and everybody's wants to get there in life. But regardless of that, there's always also the human being kicking in. And I'm going to fine-tune what you guys said because it's pretty close to how I try to make the decision. It's what is my value to actually help? If there's other people there that, my help will be minor relatively, I'm going to photograph because this is what I'm there to do, and hopefully I can help more with that. If somebody else if nobody is there, I forget I have a camera. I actually came across, I didn't think about that, but I remember one time I was doing a story about dominatrix, and we were there at an exhibition about her. Coming back, we come across a car accident. I have my camera in the back, but we were the first guys on the scene, and we were trying to pull the people out of the car and try to help. And 10, 15 minutes later, the ambulances came, and we were helping everybody. And I'm like, wait, I just had a dominatrix trying to pull people out of a car. Like, wow, the pictures I could have made. Who cares? Yeah, who cares? So in that case, there's no question. So just as a rule of thumb, rules of thumb help when you have a second to make your mind. Yes?
So do you wish you
No.
handled that situation
No,
differently?
no. I saved one girl. The other two died. But it helped. There was nobody else there. So that's it. I didn't even think of it. I don't know. It's like afterwards it occurred to me that I had cameras. It just didn't occur to me even. This is actually one of my pictures. I was working on a story about the African refugees in Israel. If you guys don't know the story, starting in 2007, Sudanese refugees started to come to Israel, moving through Egypt. We're talking about refugees from the genocide in Darfur and civil war in South Sudan. After they started coming, more and more people started coming also from Eritrea, the Ivory Coast, a variety of African countries. Until a few months later, we had a situation that there were not 300 people as I first started doing the project, but a few thousands. And people were arriving in Tel Aviv, my hometown, and suddenly I heard that there was 200 people that were taking refuge in the Bulldog. The Bulldog was a karaoke bar in Tel Aviv where I tended to humiliate myself a few years back. So I had to go and see for myself, and I was photographing, and then I get to this kitchen of the Bulldog, which is now the shower for 200 people from Sudan and the Ivory Coast. And I take this picture, not this picture, I take this picture without the guy, empty, the whole shower, but I feel it wouldn't actually have an impact because who's going to actually notice the hose? So I wait a few minutes, and then this gentleman comes along, and I have a talk with him in a very broken French. He's from the Ivory Coast, and I explain to him what I want to do and ask for his permission to photograph him. And then another key ethical issue comes along, which is the issue of power. As a photographer, you have power. You come or you represent power. Or when you're photographing people in very distressed situations, you might be able to use that power in a very complicated way. Here in this case, this gentleman, he doesn't want to have trouble. He just wants to have quiet. He wants to get into Israel. He doesn't know who I am. I'm a guy with a camera, a big guy with a camera. The instinct thing would be to say yes, even though you don't want to. So for me, I had another few minutes trying to explain to him that it's very valid to say no, and nothing's going to happen to him. That it's a human being and I just want to help, and if he doesn't, that's totally fine. That actually was my ticket in. He said that because I was so honest about it, that he actually thought that I knew what I was doing. So that's one issue. I'll go inside and I photograph this, and I'm thinking to myself, what on earth are you doing right now? Where is the line between being a photographer and crossing a line of going into somebody's space? So there's another ethical issue about how to respect somebody in this kind of place. What kind of imagery are you making? How are you respecting your subject? How are you respecting your viewer? If you're not respecting your subject, your viewer will not respect you as well, let alone maybe the subject will not respect you, especially after imagery like this. Both cases involve nudity. Both cases involve people in distress. When is the right picture to take? When do you stop? This situation actually came in a lower level a year back. I was working in Cambodia, self-assigning myself to a story about the healthcare situation of children in Cambodia. At that time, Cambodia was the second worst country for children in Asia. Almost 10% of the children didn't make it to the age of 5. 7% of the children even didn't make it through birth. And while I was photographing, I was working with UNICEF and other organizations. So when you go to a hospital and you're represented by UNICEF, you have power. People there want to get medical attention. They're not really aware of their rights or wrongs. All they want to get is medical attention. So here going for the bathroom, it's a little bit different. Here I stopped here and let them go inside. It was also not important. This is actually much more important of a picture. But then, I told them that I want to photograph also labor. This was an integral part of the project. So while I was photographing in an operation room, suddenly somebody grabs me, said, come along, and obviously they don't talk English, so I go along and they're rushing a woman in a bed, and I see that she's in partial anesthesia, and they start working on her, and I start photographing, and I don't really understand what they wanted me to photograph, but I understand that they want me to photograph because I thought maybe it's something for the hospital. But then this happens. If you've never seen a C-section, this is how it looks like. So labor. Yeah, exactly what I thought as well. It's kind of like the alien. So, I don't know, man, we're freaked out by labor, and this is happening, and I'm quite shocked. And again, the question is, what do you guys think? Should I have been taking this picture?
Yes.
Why?
Because you're not going to be the doctor here. If you're allowed in the room, and he obviously has medical professionals around helping him, I mean, I don't think that you're going to be handing the scalpel over.
It's not an issue of helping her, it's an issue of invading her privacy.
Did she know that you were going to...
We didn't have time to talk. She was rushed, and I was like, hey, lady, I'm here with a camera. And I didn't know what's going to happen to her. Everybody wanted me to photograph. Suddenly like, oh, this is what's happening. Oh, my God.
Could you take the picture, and then once she is in better shape, ask her?
So this is what you guys would do? First take the picture, then ask the person, get validation? Sounds good? What happens if you can't get validation?
Then I wouldn't use it.
Nick Wood photographing the kid in the running naked. I'm sure he didn't ask for validation, not even after. For sure. Should he used it? Trust me, the 20th century would look a little bit different if he hadn't. Slightly different, at least the Vietnam War, definitely. It's a good question. When do we cross the line? What is legit, what is not? And this is also a cultural issue, guys. It's what is legit in the US might not be legit somewhere else, or vice versa. In this case, just to give you guys a little bit more food for thought, there was a sense of validation in a weird way, because what happened afterwards, I was kind of shaken, but they take out this child and they put her, it's a girl, they put her on that tray that you see there in the back, they take her away, and then the mother looks at me and starts doing like this, because this is the only thing that she can move. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess you want me to take your picture, right? So I photograph her, and she says, no, 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 and she points backwards. So I said, oh, the baby. So I go and photograph the baby, and I go back, and I turn the screen. So the first time she sees her baby is on my camera. And suddenly there's this weird photographic moment that we really live for, that two people converse in a way that you cannot really explain, while they cannot even talk. And both of us are crying at this time. So then she just said yes, and that's it. That was the validation I needed. So this is why it's here on the wall. And she was okay. She's 42, by the way. The woman, she was really happy. That's her first baby. She was so happy to have it. So this is why the crying, that it finally actually happened. But it's a tricky situation, guys. Where do you cross the line? And I'll give you a few case studies, because there's issues of legal versus cultural. You know, I'll give you a question that I often give my students. Two situations. You're walking in the streets of Manhattan. Suddenly, you know, you're in the East Village. There's lower windows. There's a couple naked they're doing their thing in the window. You're lifting your lens and you're photographing, you know, very long lens. You're photographing their act into their windows. Scene number one. Scene number two, you entered McDonald's. Suddenly you see a dog running in the streets. You want to take a picture, but the salesperson says, I'm sorry, sir, we don't allow photography. Please don't photograph. When are you doing something wrong? What do you think?
Me? You don't take a picture without the people giving consent unless you have a message during wartime, like you were saying, where it really is something urgent that you need to do. But otherwise, you think one of the ground rules, I'm not a photographer, would be consent, and therefore you can't.
I'm saying legally. Which one is the problematic issue? The McDonald's guys. Culturally wise, we would expect to respect some private spaces. But there was actually an exhibition that went out in Chelsea a couple of years ago of somebody actually photographing into people's houses, not necessarily sexual acts, but very intimate situations. And that was fine legally. Totally unacceptable socially, but legally, yes. Versus in the US, it's more critical where you're standing rather than what you're photographing. Now, yes.
So you can, if you're inside a McDonald's, but shooting something going on outside of a McDonald's,
You can't if they don't
That's
allow
not
it.
okay?
If they ask you not to shoot, that's not okay. They can tell you what to do on their premises. It's who owns the ground. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense in Israel. It's like, who cares where I'm standing? It's what I'm shooting. If I'm standing outside and I'm shooting into an army base, I'm going to get arrested. All right? If I'm going to do it's more important the nature of the image that you're making rather than where you're making it from. So different cultures would work very differently with that and also judge the imagery in a different way. This is, for example, a picture that was taken by Philip Lorca di Corsia, a very famous American artist. Did a series called Heads in Times Square, where he placed some strobes on scaffoldings and he photographed this, a series of he photographed 3,000 people and selected 17 people out of them, just their heads, trying to find people, you know, in their different states of mind, kind of locked in themselves while they're in the outer space. He printed them pretty large and put them in the gallery, had a catalog, and was sued by this gentleman, saying that he invaded his privacy and he made, you know, he did advertising by the catalog and had commercial gain by selling the pictures. It went to 3 appeals and eventually the photographer won. Okay, so in saying legally, if you don't really have the right for privacy when in the street. Maybe you think that, you know, private space is one thing, another. You have a few seats, guys, if you want to join. Culturally wise, yes. But let me show you another thing. This is, for example, another religious guy in Israel. It was photographed by Alex Livak, one of the main photographers or the most awarded photographers in the history of Israel. Awarded the Israel Award, which is the highest acclaim one can possibly do. Has a very satirical style, very funny style, very interesting sense of humor. And he, in this case, photographing this gentleman next to this poster, which was obviously not really part of this world. The Hasidic man sued him, and in this case, he won in the Israeli court, because he actually proved that there was severe damage for him socially within his society after this picture was taken. Theoretically, you know, we're out there in the public space, and one can shoot whatever they want. But in this case, the court ruled, and it was a precedent, about $5,000–6,000 worth of payment, because he really was hurt and was kind of an outcast in his society. So the issue also, if you hurt somebody, might be tricky in this case. But if somebody sued, let me tell you about my lawsuit. So this lady on the right sued me a couple of years ago because I photographed this picture and exhibited it as an art piece in a hotel, which was one of my clients. So they printed a few prints of it and we had it in the hotel. So she sued me in the Israeli court, totally unrelevant suit, you know, really made up that I, again, publicity issues, and I humiliated her because she's in a bathing suit, to the level that the judge was kind of like, you're on the beach in a bathing suit. But I met with her, and I tried, you know, to ask her to just drop the case because it didn't make sense and it's going to cost both of us a lot of money. And I tried to explain to her, because she was saying, you know, you just humiliated me because you're on the beach. And I'm like, you don't understand the legal issues versus the cultural issues or the perception. Legally, I could photograph you, there's no problem. Legal, perception-wise, okay, let's say that you're a Hasidic woman looking at this. You're asking, who is this prostitute? You're a, secular person in Israel. It's like, where can I get this bathing suit? You're a lesbian woman. Can I get her number? It's totally different issues of perception, personal perception, and also culture. If I'm showing this to religious people versus hippies, they're going to look at this totally different and read something different into it. So the question, what is allowed, what is the right thing, is also personal for you, but it's also part of what you legally can do or not. I want to move on to another subject. During the story that I was doing about the African refugees of Israel, I came across a very interesting thing. You also, again, you work with people in need, but you specifically work with refugees. This picture was taken after a couple of families, Sudanese families, crossed the border. This is the border between Israel and Egypt. It's a very interesting border, at least used to be. Now it's a little bit more intense. But you would have like a very simple fence. In front of that fence, there's going to be a dirt road of about 10 yards that nobody can cross, because if somebody crosses, there's the footprints. And then there's a road without any lights. So I drive over it, you know, back and forth, hoping that some refugee is going to cross so I can make a picture, because it's important for my project. And nobody cooperates with me that night. Suddenly I see this white spot on that fence. So I turn my headlights. I see that dress, get on my camera with my long lens, lie on the ground, and try shooting something that is a little bit stable. So that takes about 30 seconds, and the guy on the Egyptian side starts screaming at me crazily. So I photograph a few more, and then I get in my car, start driving, and the Israeli army stops me, like, why on earth did you just, we had to leave our movie and come to save your guts because you're pointing something into Egyptian territory. Do you want to be killed? So then you act really stupid. No, you know, just a photographer, look at the picture, so good. Bye-bye, I'm going home. Whoops. Regardless of that, the issue is that most of these people were in jail. So I had to go into jail to photograph them. I contacted a magazine and offered them some pictures for free. Guys, there's some seats here. It's going to be more comfortable if you guys want. And I was allowed access to jail. Now, when you have to do that, two ethical issues happen. First of all, you're photographing people in jail. So if it's the people that you're photographing, that's great, you have permission, but other people, they didn't choose to be there. Definitely didn't choose to be there. Respecting their privacy and, you know, not taking advantage of the fact that you're, again, a person with power is something that, you know, I think there's a very clear cut what you should or shouldn't do. In this case, there was another issue. If I'm showing you a series of pictures, you know, photographing these refugees, what was the second issue I was trying to attend? This one is a little bit deceiving, so. Can you recognize any of them? No. When you photograph refugees especially, and especially from an enemy country, which is even more tricky, Sudan and Israel are not friends to say the least. In this case, we heard from the UNHCR, the United Nations High Council for Refugees, that Sudanese families were targeted by Sudanese authorities if they found out that their relatives were in Israel. So it was critical if actually to photograph them. And again, they don't make the decisions they're going to be photographed. You've been let in by a magazine, by the prison authorities, by the UNHCR. Again, it's your personal responsibility as a photographer to take care of your subjects, which is a very, very tricky thing and not really thought about a lot. It's very easy to take advantage of somebody in this situation because it makes a better picture. Very easy. And in this case, even this picture, which was taken in Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel, quite moving day where survivor of one genocide come to visit the genocide of a different people, the place that they're living in. So it's a very moving picture, and for me it was very important to include in the project. But this one, for example, I asked the guys in the UNHCR, do I get a pass for this? Is this obscure enough? And they said, okay, and especially because this guy in the middle didn't have any family in Sudan. So it's a tricky issue. How do you actually take care of the people, and especially in prisons, and especially in refugees? I want to talk to you about, I had a lecture a couple of days ago, and or actually yesterday, and a very interesting gentleman that deals a lot with philosophy brought up a question about how a presence of a photographer in a scene actually affects the scene. As photographers, it's a pretty tricky question. Theoretically, what would be the best thing to do? Be invisible. No? Yeah? No? Nobody? Be invisible. Be invisible. Both for myself and especially not affect the scene. You want to photograph something that is valid, that is right, at least if you come with the right intention. You also want to be invisible so people don't react to you. So again, you have the most candid thing, but it's not always possible. And I want to start this actually with leaving you with something that kind of gave me a little bit of food for thought. I want to show you a small video that I saw from Ferguson, which happened a few months ago.
Oh my God, gun range, gun range, gun range. Gun pointed. My hands are up, bro. My hands are up. Hands up. Gun raised and pointed. Raised and pointed at the civilian. Hands up. I will fucking kill you. Get back. Hands up. Get back. You're gonna kill him. He's trying to kill him. He's trying to. Get back. What's your name, sir? Your name's Go Fuck Yourself? All right, go fuck yourself.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, officer, go fuck yourself.
Officer, go fuck yourself. He's trying to kill me.
I hope you guys are watching. He had to be told by another officer to point his finger. He threatened to kill my friends outside here, man. On my stream, oh, you're the stream guy, right? Yeah. On my stream, he said he's gonna fucking threaten to kill. He's gonna kill me. I filmed it. I can't believe that shit, man.
So sorry for the quality, but you can understand the nature of the situation. Sorry for everything that comes afterwards as well. Jesus. Ferguson. There's an interesting question. What's the balance? What do you guys think was the problem in Ferguson in relationship to affecting the situation? Obviously, like, I brought this thing because it troubled me to see this. I think that guy has no business being a police officer or any member of any kind of security thing, and maybe a check at the shrink would help. But regardless of that, you saw a little bit of the police presence there. What do you think of that? Was it good? What is bad? What was the problematic aspects of it?
They seem to be the confrontational ones. I mean, maybe not more so than the protesters, but you would think that law enforcement would be the one to take the higher road and not go tell someone to go fuck themselves.
Well, we would hope so, at least. There's an issue, well, in a lot of conflicts, as for example, Occupy Wall Street or in Ferguson, suddenly there was a conflict between the police and the people covering the story, and where that balance is at between the right to actually report and the freedom of speech versus interfering with police activities. There's not a clear, here I cannot tell who did what, and intentionally I chose something that is a little bit vague and very troubling. But sometimes, as a photographer, I see sometimes people a little bit, crossing the line of respecting the work of others, but on the other hand, I also see the policemen taking advantage of lack of accountability and doing things that are illegal towards reporters. But another question is, the beginning, obviously, everything went berserk in St. Louis, right? And we could understand the presence of photographers. But after a week, 10 days, at one point, some people actually were wondering, especially photographers on the ground, if the demonstrations continued just because of the presence of the media. If the media would not be there, if everything would be quiet by now. I don't know. I haven't been in Ferguson. But it's an interesting question. A lot of times you have situations where demonstrations are made for the purpose of the media. I showed you that woman going back in the field, in the line of soldiers. That settlement was built in. It's kind of a symbol for the anti-separation barrier struggle, because every week on Friday after prayer, there would be some kind of parade towards the demonstration barrier, a walk, and then they would make some kind of act, and then they would go into confrontation every week. And the only there were two intentions here. One, make a point, but more than that is have the media. When the media stopped coming, suddenly it became quiet. So a question about the involvement. Sometimes the involvement goes an extra mile a little bit, and it is a little bit more tricky in other aspects. I want to show you another video. This one is from the Lebanese war between Israel and Lebanon. We're going to have a little bit of Israel here, obviously, because I'm from there. So in 2006, there was a month-long war between Israel and Lebanon. Hezbollah on one side, Israel on the other side, firing missiles one at each other. And at one point, Israel fired a missile to a place called Tyre. And this is the report, including pictures of Tyler Hicks from the New York Times, a highly awarded photographer that won also, among other things, as a group, the Pulitzer Prize and other things. So first, let's look at this and then examine it a little bit more carefully.
It ended almost as quickly as it began. A giant crack, just a really, really, really loud sound that kind of gets you in your stomach, went off, and pieces of debris came through an open window, and everybody got down on the ground. We stood up, the lights had gone out. We looked out through the window, and there was this huge, huge cloud of black smoke. An entire 7-story building in a heap of rubble with a bunch of burning mattresses in the center. I mean, it was kind of confusing, this jumble of all of these pieces of people's lives. And the building had been empty. No one had been inside, so it was a little unclear what exactly the reason was for the targeting. It's possible that there was a Hezbollah office of some sort, but it was largely a residential building. About 12 people were hurt from buildings nearby. And it was just really quite emotional and very keyed up. There were a lot of people running around, some trying to pull fire hoses. A fire truck came up, and people were sort of walking around in a daze. People were chanting support songs to Nasrallah in various parts of the blown-up area. For the New York Times, this is Sabrina Tavernisi Entire.
Interesting, right? Did you notice something funky, something weird in the pictures that you just watched?
The man in the wires, looked like there was in one of the pictures, someone was hurt.
Yeah. Up.
But in all the others, there were no hurt people.
It's like, that was only one person actually visualized. I think it's this one being hurt, right? Okay, let's look carefully at that guy, okay? Look at him carefully. Now I want to show you a little bit more carefully the sequence of pictures. This is how it begins, right? Look at the guy with the hat on the right, okay? So he's there helping remove. Then he's running here with the back, with the hat, with his pants, Then he's again helping clear something, and then he's dead. He's hurt now. There's photographers. We don't have people wounded. Am I wounded for you enough now? Now, I'm not saying that Tyler Hicks staged this picture. I would really hope he didn't, because he's an amazing, amazing photographer that I really, really appreciate. But these people actually might have staged themselves for him, understanding what is happening there and trying to make a better picture to make a bigger statement. Because obviously there's not a lot of kids here dying and nobody else is dying. So here you are. Now you will notice if you read it carefully that the New York Times saying that a man who aided after he was injured in the aftermath of the attack. The caption was being revised because initially it described the situation imprecisely. So people kind of caught on to this. It was all criticized all over the wire, and so they didn't say that something was staged, but he got what he was doing. I'm not sure about the truth, but this is obviously a little bit interesting. A lot of times as photographers, we see people staging ourselves for that. Like the basic thing is, I want to photograph you, and you're smiling, or you're doing something for me. That's the basic staging, right? One can photograph and use that picture. Question is, if somebody is doing something for you, is that really real? Are you really portraying something to your audience? Are you respecting your audience by using that kind of imagery, regardless if you're really even staging things, which we're going to also discuss that. But if somebody is staging themselves for you, is that picture valid? If somebody's faking it, I think that we understand that. The question is how much the photographer really notices, and we kind of have an obligation as photographer, or the same way that writers have to check their facts, so do photographers. The facts might be a little bit visual in this case, but they have to do it. If you want another example of how things were funky there, so this is the Washington Post, also from that, more or less that time, July 31st, 2006. Israel managed to bomb another Lebanese village and killed a lot of people, including these guys that just didn't get in time lying under those sheets and pretending to be dead. So I don't know if anybody here is dead, guys. I don't know if the photographer thought that they were dead. Some photographers do have an agenda. And so an issue of how do you take allegiance and how do you actually stage things, especially in this pretty crazy space. You want more staging? We still keep in the war in Lebanon because it was very, very heavily criticized for a lot of usage of the media in a very hurtful way or sarcastic way in a way. A lot of people on the Lebanese side we start having an influx, so that was called the passion of the toys. That suddenly there would be a lot of toys and a lot of ruins. Israel really bombarded south of Lebanon. But now, in the aftermath, there would be a lot of pictures of, showing the rubbles, and in the rubbles you would have a perfectly placed Mickey Mouse, clean Mickey Mouse, or a teddy bear, or another Mickey Mouse, and something really perfectly placed. There was also a picture here of a wedding dress on a mannequin, and I said, don't overdo it. The left one is from a guy from AP. The right ones are from Reuters. If you want to Google this, just Google the passion of toys. You're going to find this link very, very fast. But this is the kind of imagery that is being created. So there's always a temptation of creating a picture that will make it into a publication that, either your editor is going to pat on your shoulder or that you're going to make some kind of front page or whatever, any kind of some accomplishment like that. If we talk about, and this is, I'm not really changing the situation, right? I'm just adding a toy to make a stronger emotional reaction. I'm still playing with my audience. Again, I'm not respecting them, I'm not respecting myself. For me, the line is very clear here. If you don't demand enough for yourself as a photographer to make the good picture, which is definitely there, putting a Mickey Mouse doesn't make you a better photographer. It makes you a guy with a toy. But this was all over the place. We saw that from different photographers. Like this was kind of, oh, cool, somebody else did it, so we can do it too. So when somebody else does it, we start changing the standards of the industry. And this is the most dangerous play, because suddenly people don't know what is allowed and what is not allowed, and we're going to get on that too. Let's do a little bit more staging, all right? So this lady, read the caption. A Lebanese woman was over after looking at the wreckage of her apartment in the building that was demolished by the Israeli attack in southern Beirut, July 22nd, 2006. Reuters. A couple of weeks later, a Lebanese woman reacted to the destruction after she came to inspect her house in the suburbs of Beirut, Lebanon, Saturday, August 5th, after Israeli warplanes repeatedly bombed the area overnight. I'm not saying that we didn't bomb, we probably did. It's the same woman. Look at the scar on her face, over here and over here. There were another couple of examples that I didn't bring here because they weren't as obvious visually, but it's the same woman. 4 different houses across Beirut with 4 different photographers. One of them that I actually know personally, and I trust his ethics relentlessly. Phenomenal photographer. So it's issue, who is staging who? The photographer is staging the woman? Is the woman going to all kinds of houses and crying just because she wants that picture? Maybe she has a high on getting published. I don't know, but the situation is tricky here. And as photographers in the field, we have to really understand is what we're happening is true. Not a simple situation. And it's a very tempting thing of having, oh my God, I just got this amazing picture like that guy in the rubbles. That's an amazing picture. Okay, but on the other hand, that guy is not dead. Let's move to a recent story, no more 2006, and one of the best photographers in the world, Paolo Pellegrin. So Paolo Pellegrin photographed in 2012 a story about Rochester, the birthplace of Kodak, and a place that kind of went downhill during the last few decades. He did a story and won the World Press Photo, and in this case, 2nd place in Picture of the Year award in issue reporting story, picture story. And this was the 2nd picture in the story. Now, again, let's, we can see this and also read the caption. Shane Keller, a former Marine Corps member with his weapon, Rochester, New York, USA. The title, by the way, is The Crescent, Rochester, USA, 2012. Now, this is really critical what we're saying here. So, a little bit later, Bag News, which is a photography critics blog, which I strongly recommend that you follow. It's a very interesting blog. Published this. Apparently, the guy in the picture was an editor or writer for Bag News, and he had a lot of issues with what happened there, and he talked with some professors at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, who had a photojournalism program that actually participated in this project. But the project was a group of photographers from Magnum coming to photograph Rochester, students from the Rochester Institute of Design being their assistants, or what we call fixers, getting them around. And specifically, Paolo Pellegrin was very staggered about the gangs or the weapons that was happening there, on the violence. So this is a little bit of a description if you read about, who are the people involved. But what Keller said, that there was a few issues here. First of all, the person that brought him there was the student, which was his friend. And this is not his weapon. This is a gun that he had at his house. They wanted to just go to the range, and then Paolo Pellegrin asking, do you mind going through the garage? He says that he thinks, probably it made a pretty more dramatic shot. It did, definitely, right? And afterwards, they also photographed their portraits over there. He's not a sniper, apparently, okay? And this is not in the Crescent. not in the crescent or crescent, I don't know how to exactly say this thing, but that's the main area of violence. So there was issue here of a couple of issues. One, of affecting the situation. Do you tell a person what to do, where to go through, how to do it? Yes and no. Sometimes you do. If you do a portrait of a person, sometimes you might ask them to stand in a certain way, but there's kind of a relationship that that person kind of knows what is happening, or kind of trusts you. And here there was a relationship of trust. You photograph this, but also there's the issue of how do you report of it afterwards? Do you still keep it in context? And this is basically what the claims were about, that this was taken totally out of context and used for the visual. The pictures themselves are staggering. Paolo Pellegrin, one of the best photographers in the world, there's no question about it. The question was about how should this be reported. And this very detailed accusation went viral in seconds, not seconds, hours. And it became the talk of the photojournalism world. No such accusations were made against a photographer like Paolo Pellegrin. Paolo Pellegrin is kind of like the Cartier-Bresson of today, just so I understand a little bit who we're talking about. If you don't know Paolo Pellegrin, please Google him. So everybody was in shock about where this is going. Paolo Pellegrin and Magnum replied to this, saying a few things. First of all, that the guy was saying that is about his capability of a sniper, so he assumed he's a sniper. That he wasn't sure where they were at, and he didn't think that he actually mentioned the Crescent, but more like Rochester, which is not 100% true. That this is a portrait, actually, and therefore, you know, there's different dynamics that could have been respected. So he was kind of trying to address it, and some of it was accepted, some of it's not. I strongly suggest you guys, you know, try to Google this with Bag News, Paolo Pellegrin, and go read the back and forth. Both sides are posting a lot of things. And it's a pretty staggering thing that, you know, about how we really leave things into context. It's very easy to use something as an illustration, or to use something just because it kind of makes sense visually in something. And, you know, don't let the facts destroy a good story. I want to speak here very, very carefully, because I have the highest esteem to Paolo Pellegrin. And if this thing really happened this way, it's extremely, extremely troubling. There's also an issue of plagiarism that was involved there, because the story behind it, the summary of the story, was kind of, a large part of it was copied from an article in the New York Times 10 years before that described Rochester. In that case, actually, I really accept what Paolo said, that their editors, you know, write a general text that introduces the story. It's an internal text. It's nothing that the issue of plagiarism doesn't really rely on, is important there. It's just an introduction to the story. The captions are critical. This is the responsibility of photojournalists that was on the ground. I'm bringing this for an issue of, you know, misrepresentation and how to really be careful about how we're using information, and about our responsibilities for the journalist. Not to play with the facts, not to, when we don't know, we don't know. Let's say that we don't know, that's totally fine as well. If a picture cannot be used sometimes, and very rarely it cannot be used, bite your tongue. Understand that you should have done things differently and do them better next time. Let's see some other misrepresentation. So the New York Times published this picture, which was released by Associated Press. The Associated Press titled, they bought this picture from a photographer on the ground. We call it a stringer. That means he's not an employee of the Associated Press. The caption here says, an Israeli policeman and a Palestinian on the Temple Mount. Anybody here has been to the Temple Mount? Yeah. Did you ever see a gas station on Temple Mount? Anywhere close to the Temple Mount in a radius of a couple of miles? Maybe a couple of miles. Now, the real story, this is Tuvia Grossman, a Jewish student from Chicago that happened to be in Jerusalem. Him and a couple of his friends took a taxi, wanted to go to the Wailing Wall. They actually happened to cross through an Arab neighborhood, and then a mob of 30 people stopped them, stoned the car, took them out of the car, and almost killed them. Until Tuvia Grossman suddenly kind of managed to make it out and walk towards this gas station, when the policeman is actually shouting there at the Palestinians to save his life. Obviously, the photographer on the ground who saw the picture had different intention of how this picture can be used. Imagery can be really misguiding if not coming with the right information. So obviously the New York Times published a a correction, but it was actually not their fault. The fault is the Associated Press didn't really check the facts. And now the usage of imagery of stringers, it's a little bit more tricky. One needs to check the facts much more. You want to see a weird thing with this picture that I found while preparing this exhibition? So this is not an ad for Coca-Cola, even though you would think it is. If you can't read it because of the weird font here, ask any Palestinian about your corporate color and he'll tell you. Don't drink Coca-Cola, support Israel. By supporting American products, you're supporting Israel. So the blood color and Coca-Cola, I'm sure Coca-Cola is going to be happy to know that this is the way that this imagery is being used. Again, as if this is a Palestinian, even though it's a Jewish person, attacked by Palestinians. So the usage of imagery is sometimes pretty staggering. Let's have some fun. Totally different subject. So, in Washington in 2010, there was a peace summit, including some of the Middle East world leaders like Obama, Netanyahu on his left, Mubarak on the left, which is used to be the Egyptian president, Abu Mazen here, which is still the Palestinian prime minister, and King Abdullah from Jordan. This picture was taken by the Getty Images. When, what was the name? Al-Haram newspaper in Egypt published this picture, he changed it a little bit. Took Hosni Mubarak from here, flipped him, put him in the middle, you know, pushed, yeah, Hosni Mubarak has to be first, right? He's our president. So that was kind of interesting. We're getting here to actually we talked about how to manipulate the facts. Now, as photographers, like obviously as writers, and some of you are, you kind of understand the sensitivity of how not to manipulate the facts. We saw a couple of textual examples that related to the captions that the photographers are using, or the agencies that are using in their name. Now let's talk a little bit about manipulation of the facts through the pictures. So this is a cultural adjustment, let's say. Okay? I don't know if it's so harmful. You know, for us it's a joke. For the Egyptians, it's like, well, now they hate his guts, but then it was like, yeah, our boss. Do you know this picture? It became a kind of an iconic picture. A few years ago, in 2011, finally, we got him. The Situation Room in the White House with Obama and all the team. Now, the picture ran everywhere, excluding in the Hasidic community in Israel. But when the Hasidic community publishes this, there's a problem. There's a woman in the room. And we Hasidic women we the Hasidic people, it's not, you know, we should not have women next to men. So, goodbye, Hillary. Ta-da. What?
The second woman is also.
Oh, yeah, the second woman as well. Poof. So, sorry, ladies, but there's some places that you're not welcome, definitely not visually. So yeah, regardless of political implications, 2016, but so an interesting, again, cultural adjustment of using Photoshop to something that would never otherwise be. Before that, probably the magazine would not use that picture or bite their tongue and try to maybe cross the face of Hillary or something else. If we're talking about crossing faces or something else, let's cross something else. So, this is a meeting between Jalili, which was the head of the nuclear program in Iran, and Ashton, which is the UN commissioner to visit the nuclear. This is their press conference afterwards, and unfortunately, Ashton, if you want the full name, by the way, Catherine Ashton and Saeed Jalili. Sorry, just so you can, if you guys want to. So this was the original picture that was photographed by AP. This is how it was published in Al-Mashari, the main newspaper in Iran. She's not decent, so now she is. There was a lot of reactions online, some of them very, very funny, putting Ashton in all kinds of really interesting clothing and how she's gonna, following her fashion throughout, like it's the Emmys or something, throughout that convention. So, yeah, whatever helps. Anyway, these are. Before that, there were alterations in the history of photography. People manipulated pictures, but to a certain extent. you either had to be a darkroom wizard or a retoucher, or you would have to use a huge computer that would take a whole room and have a phenomenal assistant next to you, that could really do everything. Now, a filter on Photoshop, if a couple of functions, and if somebody knows what they're doing, ta-da! So it's much more easier now, and therefore, ethical issues are more often. Before that, if you would see that would be shocking. This is now, oh, of course. So we can say here, is it harming? Is it not harming? These are funny examples. We don't really see the harm in it. But again, I always believe that once you cross a line, that line gets pushed and pushed and pushed until we don't really know what is right and what is wrong. So let's show you a couple of things how this line is pushed, because it's easy. Back in Lebanon, do you know this picture? No? Do you know this picture? It's the same picture. So Reuters photographer photographed this picture, and unfortunately it was kind of like, both of them are crops, by the way, of the original picture. You can see that this one is a little bit lower than this one if you really compare it photographically, but it's the same picture. I lined them home. Trust me, it's the same picture. So we had this picture, but it wasn't dramatic enough for some reason, because I think it's still dramatic. So he took it and did some very, interesting Photoshop work. Photoshop 101 would probably help him, or I don't know, but you really have to be stupid to put this online. And Reuters put this online. So it was a tricky situation there, and Reuters was heavily, heavily bombarded. Most of the puppets that you saw before, a lot of manipulation, a lot of staging. Reuters was very heavily criticized during the Lebanese war until they really had to change their ethical code. And I'm going to tell you about one of the guys that suffered from this. But this was one very, very famous example, because it was so obvious that any kid could see that this building was copied, let alone this beautiful smoke we just came, or the building here that appeared in the middle of the smoke, or all kinds of really basic Photoshop things that anybody in the crowd can do better right now, right? Is it allowed or not? I think that the answer is obvious about trying again to manipulate public opinion. The other ones did not try to manipulate public opinion, mostly to curate to the cultural sensitivities of the specific publication and where it was published. So we might think of some kind of cultural justification and say, other than Hillary being taken out, which I'm sure that she doesn't appreciate, but okay, this one, it's obviously issues of propaganda, of trying to turn the table one way. It's not only that the agencies of the photographer try to change something, sometimes it's on a country level. This is, for example, two pictures that were published, one by Reuters, one by AP. And they were released by the Iranians of an experiment with the missile launching. Unfortunately, the missile, the second from the right, didn't really fire, but it really didn't look right. So if you look really carefully, this missile looked like this missile, and this bottom looks like this bottom. Again, not a very amazing thing. They first sent out the first picture, and then they really tried to correct it, so some agencies got the first one, some didn't. And here we had two copies of the same one, which was kind of funny for everybody. But it really shows you how sometimes on a country level, because this came from the main press agency of Iran, distributed to agencies around the world, there's a sense of propaganda, how to use imagery in a way to create public opinion, or how to a little bit fix reality. Again, a little bit of a funny situation of we fucked up, now let's correct it. But you cross one line, you cross it over and over again. I don't know how much we can trust imagery coming there from there right now, just because of that. A little bit of a famous story that you might have come across during your studies. We're moving back to Iraq now with this picture that was published by the Hartford Courant. It's part of a larger group of newspapers. The photographer there was actually photographing for the LA Times. Photographed this situation in Iraq in a refugee camp and sent it back to the LA Times. They took the picture, they spread it around. Eventually, the Courant picked it up and published it. Checking it a little bit better, people saw that something was messed up. And then eventually, they saw that something didn't make sense in the picture graphically. They contacted the chief editor of the LA Times, who contacted the photographer and asked him, please tell me that there was a problem in the satellite connection, in something that you did, your computer crashed. Please tell me that you didn't do what you really did. The photographer Brian Wolski at least had the integrity to admit to what he did. These are the actual photos. This is the first picture, and this is the second picture. The problem is that neither one of them had the impact that he wanted to create. So I took this guy, or everything from this picture, and planted of them this guy from the second picture. Didn't do it very well. There's some, the stitching is not perfect. This is how they actually got understood that something is problematic, like here in the ground and other parts. And he admitted immediately to it. I put the pictures together. Do you know what happened right afterwards? Brian Wolski lost the capability of working as a photojournalist ever. He was immediately fired, had to bring out everything back, and that was it. If you Google his name now on Wikipedia, he's now having a commercial wedding photography business. No more journalism for you. What he did there, he risked both himself, but also the publication he was working with. The credibility of the LA Times and all the group of magazines he was working for was put at stake. Definitely they cannot accept that, but again, it's also, you could say, like, it's not such a big deal, right? You know, he wanted to represent something that was there, he just didn't really catch the picture, so he fixed it a little bit, right? No big deal. It's a huge deal. You cannot fix a picture. There is no, you can, process a picture, and we're going to talk also how much can you process a picture, but you cannot fix a picture, you cannot change it, you cannot take things out of it, add things to it. This is a misrepresentation of reality in the same way that you wouldn't expect a writer to a little bit, fix the facts and to write things a little bit differently just because it's more comfortable. You definitely wouldn't expect it from a photographer, yes.
Can you adjust it in regards to like brightness and contrast?
Yes, okay. We're going to talk about the limits of what you can do and what you cannot do. But if there's any kind of contract between me and you, I'm the photographer, you're the readers, I'm guessing you guys are expecting what you're seeing is actually what I photographed. Once that relationship is gone, we say in Hebrew that you kind of cut the branch on which you're sitting. And this is basically what's happening now with photographers that are a little bit funky in using Photoshop or other things. It might be a very sweet temptation, very short one, but eventually it creates two things. First of all, the credibility of photojournalism is at stake. The second thing, which I don't realize, they're not demanding themselves to be the best photographers that they can. They will never raise to be the best photographers in the world. It's just not happening. If you don't have the standards of what you demand from yourself, you're not going to reach it. Another example, much more recent, last year actually. In this case, an AP photographer or stringer, Narcisco Contreras, I'm hoping that I'm saying it properly. This is a picture from Afghanistan. The guy also was part of a group that won or Syria, actually I think it's Syria, I'm not sure. He part of a group that won the Pulitzer in 2012 as part of AP, the whole body of work of how they covered Syria, won the Pulitzer Prize. But in this case, he was running with a videographer, and they were running together with this militant, and they were running down the hill. They were gunshots, and he photographed the picture, and he liked it, but there was a video camera in the left side of the picture. So he used Photoshop a little bit, and he submitted to AP, and nobody knew about it. And everything was okay, right? Because nobody noticed. Unfortunately, AP wanted to prepare the submission for the year-end competitions. With with a freelancer like myself, I prepare my own submission, and I submit it myself. Larger agencies like Associated Press, Reuters, Getty, AFP, EPA, and such, they prepare the submissions for their photographers. Sometimes they confirm with them, usually they do, and then they submit it on their behalf. It's a lot of work, so you guys photograph, we'll guys take care of the awards. And there's editors, those guys know what they're doing, so it's better when somebody else helping you. So they asked him about this, among this picture, and he looked at it, and suddenly, at least, he had the decency to understand that he's not putting only his name at stake, but also their name at stake. Because one of the things that the World Press Photo, for example, changed this year in their submission guidelines, and we're going to talk about why they changed it, was us saying that every picture that wins, the photographer has to submit the raw files, because they have to understand what kind of changes were made to the picture and verify that there was not a lot of them made. And he understood that if this picture wins, the AP are going to get a lot of heat. So he came forward and said, guys, we cannot submit this picture, and this is what happened. What happened afterwards? AP released a statement and really trying to stand, to its standards. Deleting the pictures from all of his archives, contacting the outlets, and definitely terminating this guy's career. A very, very promising young photographer. They decided to omit a video camera. Now, he actually wrote a very interesting blog entry, admitting to everything he does and contemplating on that, and actually saying that was wrong. I made a mistake, and I'm paying the price. This is exactly what I should do, which I very, very much respect. So I don't know if the guy will ever going to get back to the industry. It's a pretty hard thing to do after what he just did, but hopefully, because the guy has a lot of talent. I don't have a picture here, but I'll tell you about a friend of mine, or used to be kind of a friend of mine, a guy that used to work for Reuters in Israel, and after the Lebanese war, there was a lot of sensitivity because of all the alteration that has been made. His background was as a graphic designer, so he really knew his way around Photoshop. We always envied about how the pictures always look amazing when he touched them. We actually kind of, it was so severely manipulated that we had a joke that his name started with a Y, so we always said, like, did you already press the Control Y in Photoshop to amp up your pictures? And then in 2007, he photographed a politician came and placed a worth at Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum, and he photographed that event for Reuters and sent a picture back. And Reuters, because of the sensitivity, were checking the pictures a little bit better, and they were like, this thing is really vignetted. There's too much dark areas in this picture. So they blew it up. And then they saw that in the back there was a janitor that he really darkened and tried to eliminate him so we don't see him in the picture. Theoretically, an acceptable darkroom technique of not wanting to expose, but this was to a level that didn't respect the integrity or how the picture was actually photographed. What happened the next second? Hello, mister. It's your chief editor. Please return your cameras. You're done with Reuters. We're done with photojournalism. Have a good life. Ethical issues should be upheld very, very tightly, guys. There's no messing around, because it is eventually the reputation of journalism. If we cannot keep we are the guards on the fence. If we cannot keep our own integrity, we will not have a place to work anymore. We talked about Photoshop, right? So let's see a little bit more. It's not only how photographers use Photoshop, but also how magazines use Photoshop. The same picture was sent to both magazine guys. It's not that photographers send out different pictures for each magazine. Each one processes them their own way. And you can imagine looking at one or the other, there's different things of emphasis. I don't know which one it creates to your flavor, but it's more than just which filter do you like. These pictures are read a little bit differently. In one, he's more guilty than the other. In one, he's more black than the other. It's not just filters. It's how pictures are read, which it's sometimes a little bit, I'm hesitant to tamper with. So just as an example, in those two magazines, cannot be accused for not trying to do the best job they want to do. But before we really open the floor to questions, do you guys know this picture? All right, so this picture was taken by Paul Hansen from the AP, and in last year it won the World Press Photo Award, this picture of the year. World Press Photo is the most prestigious photography competition or photojournalism competition other than the Pulitzer. The Pulitzer, you have to be nominated or submitted through independent agency. For the World Press, everybody can apply. So it's the most prestigious picture and competition, and to win this award is one of the highest things that you can ever win as a photojournalist. What you're seeing here is a funeral in Gaza. Again, Israel and Gaza had a conflict. The two kids were killed, and this is a funeral. Does this picture look weird to you guys? Yes, no, how? Doesn't it look too good? Does it look like a movie poster? Yeah? The Escape from Gaza. Excuse me, it's a little bit hard to be, I'm not trying to be disrespectful for this, because I think this is a very, very painful human moment. And therefore, I'm a little bit questioning, you know, how much Photoshop was made here.
The lighting's too perfect.
The lighting is too perfect, right? There's no technical possibility, there's no physical possibility that this picture could have existed. What?
No one's really looking at the camera either, which kind of raises a red flag, because if he's as close as he appears to be, you would think that some of the eyeballs would be directed his way.
This is Palestine. No, we are used to cameras. We don't care about cameras. In front, next to him, there's another 10 photographers, all of them moving backwards, photographing. These guys know what is happening. They're doing this for already 5-10 minutes. So at this point, they're like in their own moment. And also some pictures, some people would look, but they don't care anymore. And in a way, they also understand the mathematics of the business. If you look in the camera, the picture is dead. So these guys know how to behave for the cameras, that is. But the problem is that there is no question that this picture was digitally manipulated. The question is how much? And the question that was raised here, and a very critical question that came from all around the photography world, how much is too much? There was actually, it reached a level that the World Press Photography Association had to ask for the raw file and do a criminal analysis on this picture, trying to understand how this picture was altered. The only thing that kept this as a winning picture was that the pixels were not moved. Nothing was moved. They were changed in terms of their color, density, anything, the relationship between, but the pixel did not move. He didn't stretch, he didn't add something to the picture, he didn't take anything out of the picture. He just made it pretty. The question is, do you have to have a pretty picture like this, like in this situation? How much is too much? And it's a complicated question. How much is too much? When do you guys think, like, what can I do, what I cannot do? What is legal, what is not legal? It's an open question, guys. What do you think? Chicago Bulls guy, what do you think? So Chicago Bulls guy. No? Don't think? Any person is a photographer? Nobody here is photographing?
You don't have a picture of the original, what it would look like?
I don't. Nobody has. You crazy?
Why don't they make them, like Reuters says, why don't they make them submit the original?
Oh, well, first of all, there was a comparison between the picture that he sent to the newspaper that he was working with. It's dramatically different than this one. So he did some processing. It was not as good as this one. This actually, by the way, he didn't even do himself. He sent it to a company in Italy that are masters in photoshopping. Apparently, there's a lot of photojournalists that just send their pictures that they send to competition to this company. They Photoshop them back. They make them dramatic enough. They send them back. And then the pictures are more appealing to the judges. So regardless of who should process the picture, when I was printing at the lab person knew what to do, you know, in the days of the darkroom. So there's a sense of professionalism. But the question is, when is it too much? It's a very complicated question, guys. Am I to vignette a picture a lot? Is it too much? To really darken somebody's face, to here really play with it, make it so dramatic and obviously create a, is it too much? To move something in the picture, to just, you know what, there's just this thing on the wall here, the lights, which we don't really need it. No, it doesn't really matter. Let's just like take it off because the wall is going to look nicer. Is it too much? I don't know. What is more important? That just somebody took somebody taking out the picture but left the picture as intact, or that he helped it and made it so beautiful so people would want to look at it more? But it's never how anything would be photographed. What is the right thing here?
I think the minimum standard of not moving any pixels is reasonable, would be reasonable.
Well, again, we're looking for some rule of thumbs, and one of the things is you don't change the picture. So if we look for something in photojournalism, you don't change the picture. Now, there's other than that, that light switch should stay there, even though then all of us understand that the picture will look the same with it or without it, right? The same way that that thing up or down really didn't matter too much. But here it is obviously an attempt to address how people are looking at the pictures, how attractive the pictures are, in a very complex way. The picture was approved eventually. For me, I'm always trying to think, I don't like to process my pictures too much. Every picture I photograph and I release, every picture is processed. The same way that every picture that you would photograph on a film, you would process it in a lab or during the printing process, every picture had to be processed. The question is, what can you do, what you cannot do? AP, for example, after the Lebanese war, actually created a set of actions in Photoshop that her photographers could use only those actions. And those actions didn't allow to do all kinds of funky stuff. No masks, no nothing. You can just do whatever, like contrast, color, sharpness, a little bit of things. Nothing that you could not do in the lab. Tricky situation in this case. And what happened here, the thing is that those competitions kind of set the bar. They said what is legit and what is not. And every time that something is more legit, trust me, younger photographer will push the knob one step forward. Why? More equipped, more technological, there's more things you can do. Amazing. Let's make it fun. I didn't do anything bad. And then the question of what is legal and what is not, what is legit, what is ethical, kind of get confused. I just vignetted it. It looks better. So you don't see the outer rims. So as a photographer, I didn't really invest much in trying to create a picture that actually has a vignette. All right. Yes, no. Some food for thought. What happened because of this, guys, is that the World Press Photo, they approved the picture for winning, but they changed the rules. So now, if you submit the picture to Photoshop, if your picture wins, before they declare that it wins, or any kind of winning within that, it's a candidate for winning, you have to submit the raw files. They have picture professionals comparing what you did to what was the, and if they judge that you went too far, which for them is the standard, something that is acceptable, then your image will not be accepted. Now, hopefully they will never have to make that decision, but people will actually, finally there's somebody that is a dog watch. They guarding that wall. Before that, it's like, oh my God, let me do it more and more and more, and let's win. Let's talk a little bit about the exhibition, because this is kind of the end. So the exhibition is at the Brody Hall. If you guys have a chance to visit it. It's none of the pictures that you saw here, in a weird way. It's a series that I photographed about the Arab population of Israel, photographing people that see me as their adversaries, or their enemies in some cases, and trying to create a body of work which is more about reconciliation, or how to deal with conflict photography in hopefully a surprising way, in a way that might be more effective than normally what you see on the news. So hopefully you have a chance. I want to thank all these people that made this happen and made my visit here to the museum and the university happen. And so this is it. This is where it is. This is one of my girls, Asil, a girl from Al-Fahim, an amazing soul. And thank you very much for coming. And let's open the floor for questions. As
What's the most dangerous situation, or one of the most dangerous situations that you found yourself in as a photographer, and how did you handle it?
I was lucky. I was on assignment to photograph the casino in Jericho. Jericho is a city that is part of the Palestinian autonomy territory. So it's still part of Israel, but it's under Palestinian rule, total Palestinian rule. So I drop all my ID cards, no Israeli cards, nothing that identifies me as an Israeli, and I go there and I photograph. Little did I know that we knew that the casino was closed, and people wanted to talk about the economical decree in the West Bank, or in the Palestinian Authority. So I photograph around there, and I take a road that leads, to the other side. And when it's like a one-way road, not like a dead end. When I come back, there's a car coming at me. Two guys come out, the short guy and the big guy. And the short guy comes and say, "Hi, Palestinian security police, who are you?" And I'm like, "Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm like a photographer from Holland. Yes, ID please." And I'm like, "Oh my God, what do I do?" I'm working for police, and I'm trying to find and understand if I don't have a good answer, the other guy is going to show me he's going to show me some stuff. And probably take me somewhere, and it's going to get complicated. Luckily enough, I go through my car, and I managed to find an expired ID card from about 4 years ago that says Polaris Images, my agency, and I'm like, "Here you go." So like, "Okay, you cannot photograph here anymore. Goodbye." Turns out that the casino was made into a base of the security police that nobody knew about.
So how do you think it would have ended if they found out?
I don't even want to think. It would be creative. Yeah, hopefully I would still be standing here, but I don't know. It's a tricky situation. It really depends on their personal alignments. If they're aligned with the Hamas, I might have been killed. If they were aligned with the Palestinian Authority, I would probably cause an international incident, and I would be retrieved after a while to the Israeli authorities.
So were you scared while you were in
Oh
there?
yeah, of course.
I mean, before you even got...
I saw the car coming, I was scared. I knew what was happening. I was like, because there's only one road. These guys have no reason going that way other than having a conversation with me. There's just nothing there. There's desert. And here they come. So yeah, complicated. Yes, sir.
Was there a change in that last picture?
Which
that
one?
You showed? The one with the two babies dead?
The pixels themselves were like, that means that the situation wasn't altered. Nobody added the baby, stretched the picture, but it was very highly dramatized by techniques of digital processing. The picture, when it was in the camera, did not look as good, I can assure you that. It had some technical issues with it, which were otherwise afterwards recovered or really, made differently, at least with the use of digital technology, in a very, very professional way, but in a way that made it totally unbelievable because it looked like a poster of a movie. And life, as we know, is not necessarily like in the movies.
Well, it seemed obvious that the fellow who's on the right in the front row is very dark, and there's people behind him, way behind him, who have much lighter exposure.
It's very easy to look at this and understand that there is no such light that can create these exposures on these people's faces. The only light that creates that is Photoshop light. It's very obvious. And this is why the tension came up. And it also raised the whole discussion in the photography world about what is acceptable. What can magazine or should magazine publish or not? Because the problem is that it's not only acceptable for the editor of magazines are the judges in those competitions. And if they're allowing it in, they're allowing it because they would allow it into their newspaper. And as you saw before, they're sometimes doing it themselves. So everybody here has a responsibility. It's very easy to forget about that responsibility because we're doing something cool. No, you're not. You're really cutting the branch on which you're sitting. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Do you think because they altered it that way, it becomes less credible due to like the audience's perception of is it legitimate, is it not?
You tell me. You see this picture in the newspaper. You're the audience.
Yeah.
I'm a professional. I look at it with a totally different eye than you. Do you look at this and say, now I believe it more or less?
I feel like it gives me like, I have to look into it more. It makes me feel like I have to look into it more.
So once you even think that I have to look into it more and not just like, okay, that's it, that's a problem. You have a question. You have a question mark in your heart, that's a problem. Journalism should be, this is what I tried bringing to you, to the best of my ability. You can think that, you don't share the opinion with me, you don't respect what I photographed, a lot of other things, but at least you understand that I try to bring you whatever I try to bring you. Okay? Yes? Oh, I thought you were. Yes?
What's the hardest decision you've ever had to make as a photojournalist, particularly in the to photograph or not to photograph?
That's what I showed you, the guy in the shower.
Yeah.
That, when I was standing there, I was thinking to myself, what on earth are you doing right now? Like, this is the time, I was really thinking, this is the time to define yourself. Are you photographing this or are you not? And if you're photographing, how should this be photographed? How should this be shared? I was really like trembling there, photographing this. And this is why I always try to show this and try to pose that question. And it was very uncomfortable for me. And especially when I was choosing the pictures, trust me, there were pictures which were, first of all, I tried to photograph it so nothing is shown, but even when I was choosing it, eventually I chose a very subtle picture, if you notice. And I think that in a way it's much more effective than if you would have seen his genitals, for example. You would like totally like, why did I need to see this? And then you totally disrespect me and the picture is totally non-effective. So using the right amount of information, let's say in this case, or much more, the right amount of respect is critical. Yes. Yes.
For your 18 series, was it hard to get personally involved with so many people and like not a lot of their lives? I'm sure like you had to get all the personal objects they had in the photo, you had to know them a lot.
I photographed, for those of you who don't know, in the series 18, I photographed 64 people, young people at the age of 18, all of them not wanting me in their house. So it was a very grueling process that wore me out. And when I went back home, my girlfriend thought that I was a total wreck, so she took me on vacation. It's hard, but that was the mission, to photograph people that hate you. How do you do something that is respectful, represents the other side, and creates any kind of platform for discussion? It's not that it was easy. It was, if it was easy, two things. It wouldn't be interesting to you, and it wouldn't be interesting to me. Yes?
How did you get them to agree to
The guys in the team. Let me show you what people are talking about, for those of you who haven't seen the exhibition. Here. So, we're talking about a series of about 18-year-olds in Israel. A series of portraits like this, all of them in their bedrooms. A much more human, intimate perspective about people. Before you guys leave, I want to leave you with 3 questions that I didn't cover. One of it is about issues of partial reporting. Some photographers or reporters cannot always cover everything. Tyler Hicks, which we just saw before, was highly criticized in the New York Times that they were not covering everything from Gaza. They didn't bring all the information, like, for example, no pictures of missiles firing from buildings. Where does that sound in terms of credibility or ethical issues, where the photographer or people might be put in danger versus their duty to actually report the full story? Second, what are the limits of proper behavior? What would you wouldn't do in the field because you just don't behave like that? It's not respectful for your profession. I give you an example. When 2004, Madonna was in Israel. She wanted to visit some tombs in the middle of the night. And while we were photographing her in the middle of a graveyard, a couple of photographers climbed on the graves and start photographing her. 2 others just pulled them down and explained to them that we're all in the same place. We are photographers, and they're humiliating us by doing that. So try to think, where are your borders? Third thing, would you ever pay your subject? And if you would, why? When is it okay to pay your subject? And why is it not okay to pay your subject on a normal basis? So 3 questions to take with you, which we're not going to discuss, and you're going to have as a small present for me. Now you can go. So back to 18. So this series of portraits, and then all of these are presented in the Brody Gallery, some of these with a testimony next to them. And after that, I continued just photographing their lives. And what the gentleman asked was, you know, how hard it was to go. It was hard to get in. It was very, very hard to get in. But the issue here was to create something much more intimate. Somebody asked a question afterwards, and I'm sorry I forgot. Could you repeat the question?
How did you get them to agree?
How did I get them to agree? Oh, I had to build a network of contacts. Okay. If I would call them and talk in Hebrew, they would just shut the phone immediately. So I had to hire a few people from different sects of the population. Some are Jews, some Muslims, some Bedouin. They would call the people. They would explain in Arabic what I want to do, and they would at least let us come to the house. In order to even understand who the people were, I had to, you know, do a research. Afterwards, contact youth leaders, teachers, any kind of people that had interactions with people that are 18 years old. Somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody. And therefore, eventually kind of mapping up more candidates and calling them and then coming to their houses. Eventually, we had a network of 80 people to help us photograph 64 people. More people help the project rather than people photograph for the project, which is insane. And frustrating, because you also have to manage those numbers of people every once in a while. After they allow you into the house, you come and explain again the project. This time they want to see who you are. You meet with the family, and only after that they start allow you to photograph in most cases. But they still don't trust you. So if you notice, all these portraits are very intimate in terms of perspective and location, but the body language is never inviting, and this is really testifying about the nature of our engagement. And only after that, I started breaking down the wall, you know, trying to get closer. This was much more also, you know, about the tension that we started with. And here, it's about how did I get into the house of this woman and photographed her like that, a Muslim woman putting on makeup, or, you know, having lunch like this, or dinner, actually Friday dinner with a group of Palestinians in East Jerusalem. You know, a gang member with his gang, an Israeli guy. Like, imagine a white boy going into the hardest black whatever neighborhood in St. Louis right now. That's the equivalent, you know. I'll tell you a story about this one because it's my favorite story. So this woman was engaged to be married. I showed you her before. We had her in the portraits. I photographed her twice. First time it was like this. She was in high school. She just finished high school, a very Muslim woman. Her favorite TV show was the Imam speaking about Islam, not MTV. Very pure, beautiful soul. I cannot describe her otherwise. All the family educators, so she wanted to be a teacher and stuff like that. Came out 4 months later, she was already engaged to be married. I like that interaction between the space and the person, and both the woman and the child at the same time. So after I take this picture, her sister comes into the room and she helps her a little bit with her homework, and then the sister leaves. So here I am alone with this Muslim woman in the room, and it's a little bit of an uncomfortable situation. So she goes to the door and I expect her to open the door wide so everybody can see that nothing is happening there. But instead she closes it. And she comes to me and says, "Have you ever been in love?" And I'm obviously confused a little bit, say like, yes, why? So she says, "How does it feel?" "It feels good, Anram. Why are you asking?" She said like, "Well, I'm engaged to be married. And according to Islam, it's the first time I'm allowed to love somebody. And I don't know how I'm feeling right now. You're the only man that I can talk to because you're Jewish. I cannot talk with Muslims. So how does it feel?" So we start talking about love in Arabic and Hebrew and English, kind of a salad of languages. And then she asked me about God, and I tell her that I don't believe in God. And she's like, "How can you not believe in God? You know, you Jews have your God. Us Muslims have our gods. You know, we have to make peace between the gods." And I'm like, "No." And we start talking about God. And so we're sitting on the two sides of this bed. And at one point I'm asking her, "Anram, would you ever believe that you would sit down with a Jewish guy, double your age, on your bed, talking about God and love?" She's like, "No." It's like, "Do you think anybody would believe us?" I'm like, "Not in a million years." So like, well, this is exactly the essence of this project, of showing that it's possible. So thank you, guys. Thank you for coming.
So before everybody leaves, we do have something we want to present to Natan for being such a wonderful inspiration to our students for this past week.
Please tell me it's a shirt with the Spartans. Yeah.
Yes. Hopefully we have the right size.
Yeah, well, as you can see, big. Go Spartans, especially this weekend, right? If I learned correctly, go white, go green, or the other way around?
We need to show you.
Yeah.
So can we do it down the middle?
Yeah.
And if this side does, and if this side does. All right? Because he's been wanting this.
All right.
So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Go green!
Go white!
Go green! Go white!
Go green. Good luck, guys. Thank you very much. Yes.